It's just freestyle.
I have indeed.
Alexa, stop.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صدق الله العظيم.
Good afternoon again. My name is Victoria Schofield, and I have the honor of moderating this afternoon's proceedings. And I should like to thank you all for coming. I may be one of the few people here present who was actually in Pakistan at the time of Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's execution on 4th of April, 1979, 36 years ago. And I can remember the day like it was yesterday. I want briefly to cast our minds back 36 years ago to the beginning of April. This is my diary. It is raining. It's not supposed to rain in Pakistan in April, but it is. I'm very depressed. It's clear that they're going to go ahead. Benazir has been unwell. She's just sent me a note, smuggled out of the police camp where she's being kept with her mother at Sahala outside Islamabad. They came and wanted to take Mummy and me together to jail today. As I was not well, Mummy said she would go alone, unless it was the last meeting following the dismissal of the mercy petition filed by millions. In that case, I would go with her, no matter how ill I felt. They refused to confirm or deny that it was the last meeting. Instead, they said that they would send a doctor today and we would both be taken sometime tomorrow. So it looks like Zia is to commit murder. But like us, you must be brave and control your emotions. If the worst happens, a great man is being executed for a cause he relentlessly pursued. He refused to abandon his principles under the worst victimization and vendetta let loose by a vicious and vindictive regime. That was the letter that Benazir wrote me at the beginning of April 1979. Who could have known that 28 years later, she too was sentenced to assassination? But as we know, that's another story, another memorial. I would like now to have a short message from Asif Ali Bhutto, President of Pakistan from 2008 to 2013.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear friends, to the greatest leader of the subcontinent known as Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. He stood against all dictatorships and created a party which today still stands against all form of dictators of the past and terrorism. We recently lost our leader, Shahid Mohtama Benazir Bhutto, the mother of Bilawal, Bakhtawer, Asifa, and my wife. We still stand fast today to fight all the terrorist forces under the umbrella of democracy, with democracy for the students, the children of tomorrow, the youth of tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
We're remembering his father, Shamim Zulfikar Khan, was one of the lawyers in the defense of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
इस वक्त सुबह के 6 बजे हैं।
आज मंगल है, रजब की 17 और जुलाई की 5 तारीख। ये रेडियो पाकिस्तान है। अभी अभी खबर आई है कि पाकिस्तानी फौज ने पूरे मुल्क का इंतजाम संभाल लिया है। फौज के एक तर्जुमान ने बताया है कि पीपीपी के तमाम लीडर, जिनमें वजीर आजम भुट्टो भी शामिल हैं, और पीएनए के लीडर हिफाजती हिरासत में ले लिए गए हैं। खबरें खत्म हुई।
Yesterday, my 11-year-old son telephoned me from Karachi, and he said to me, "Do not come back. It's a document of surrender. We do not want to see you back in Pakistan if you come like that. We will fight. We'll go back and fight. My country hearkens for me. Why should I waste my time here in the Security Council? You can take your Security Council. Here you are. I'm going." ये बहादुरों की कौम है। इस कौम को शिकस्त नहीं मिली है। ये कौम बढ़ेगी। ये कौम एक अजीम कौम बनेगी। ये कौम दुनिया का लोहा बनेगी। कबूल है आपको? इस कौम को दुनिया का लोहा बना के करेंगे। तो खिदमत करोगे, मेहनत करोगे, लड़ोगे, मरोगे और जदोजहद करोगे, ईमान से करोगे, खुदा की कसम करोगे। जुल्फिकार अली भुट्टो एक नहीं है, दो जुल्फिकार अली भुट्टो है। एक जो यहाँ खड़ा है और दूसरे आप, हर एक आप में से। जो आपकी तकलीफ है वो मेरी है, क्योंकि मैंने कहा कि मैं दो हूं, मैं एक नहीं हूं। एक इस जिस्म में, इस खून में, इस बुत में खड़ा हूं। दूसरा आपके रूह में, आपके जिस्म में, आपके बुत में मैं खड़ा हूं।
And we have come now after a decade in a search for peace. You must believe us when we say that we want to have peace with honor in the subcontinent. Our people have suffered for too long, and I believe we have the worst form of poverty and misery that can be imagined anywhere in the world. So we believe that it's essential for us to open a new chapter in our relations.
Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is the constitution of the people of Pakistan, and they are the best suited to speak for it. The document is their property, and they are the best suited to protect it. It is our hope and belief that under the inspiring guidance of God Almighty, the people of Pakistan will speak for their constitution and will protect it for all times to come.
इस्लाम हमारा दीन है, जमहूरियत हमारी सियासत है, और इस्लामी मुसावात हमारी इक़्तिसादियत है, और इसके अलावा ताकत का सरचश्मा अवाम है। I make a solemn pledge to you that I'll serve you with all my heart and soul. I'll serve you even if it kills me. I want the flowering of our society. I want initiative in the hands of the people. I want people to breathe. I want the suffocation to end. I know what it means to have been under dictatorship, to have been under regimes that are capricious and whimsical, regimes that decide fundamental matters in their own moments. This is not the way civilized countries run. Civilization means civil rule. Civilization means institutions. Civilization means democracy. Every institution of Pakistan has either been destroyed or it has been threatened. And that is why we face this day today. We have to rebuild democracy. We have to rebuild institutions. We have to rebuild confidence. We have to rebuild a hope in the future. We have to rebuild a situation in which a common man, a poor man, a man on the streets can tell me, "Go to hell. I don't believe in you. Go to hell. I don't like you."
Friends and brothers, see the difference today. Look where we stood 25 years ago. and see where we stand today. 25 years ago, we were the objects of ridicule and of humiliation. We were thought to be a poverty-stricken people who would never emerge to assert their rights. And that is why usurpation took place. And that is why injustice of the worst form was perpetrated against Muslim lands and against Muslim people. We have traveled a great distance, but yet we have to do more.
They called the jail superintendent and said, "This is the last meeting." He said, "Yes." It has a date. He said, "Yes." He said, "For Wednesday it's been fixed." He said, "Tonight." My father said to him, "Make arrangements for me to shave, to have a bath. It's beautiful earth and I want to be clean." And he said that tonight I'll be free. My father was very calm and he talked to family matters, he talked to party matters, and I keep seeing his face. I said that I'd like to hug my father goodbye. He'd been the president, the prime minister, he brought them back from the camps of India. They wouldn't even open the cell doors for me to kiss him goodbye. Said, "This is goodbye until the final meeting." And those were the last words he spoke to either my mother or myself.
Well, I don't want to say much. I came just to tell you that what's the personal tragedy. And they've tried to break our father. They've tortured him for 2 years. They couldn't do that. They tried to ruin his political name and now they've killed him. We have nothing to be ashamed of. They have buried a martyr today.
जहाँ तक मेरी जात का सवाल है, वो मैंने कब से वक्फ कर दिए, शुरू से लेकर मेरे वो आपकी, वो मेरी जात और जिंदगी का कोई सवाल नहीं है। लोग कहते थे कि जी भुट्टो तो भाग जाएगा, भुट्टो कहाँ जाएगा? पाकिस्तान को भुट्टो छोड़ के जाएगा? कैसे छोड़ के जाएगा? भुट्टो और पाकिस्तान एक।
It's now with great pleasure I'm going to call your hosts to the sit up on the stage, Asifa Bhutto Zardari, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Professor Ian Talbot, George Galloway, MP, and the Right Honourable Dr. the Lord Owen. It's now with great pleasure that I'm going to ask the Right Honourable Dr. the Lord Owen to speak to us. At the time of the death of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1979, he was the Foreign Secretary. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank you all for the invitation to speak, and in particular for the Bhutto family. We honor the memory of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto here today. 36 years ago, one of the tragic tasks I had to undertake as Foreign Secretary, right up until he was killed, was to try to persuade General Zia that he and others around him should allow free elections and should let Mr. Bhutto free. It was because of these two features were so inextricably linked that he was killed. They did not dare to face the people's verdict. I found myself deeply influenced as the months went by, thinking really that we could leave this as an internal matter for Pakistan people, and particularly after the Supreme Court decision. I felt myself faced by letters from Dr. Niazi, his dentist, and the description of the conditions in the prison by his daughter Yasmin. Quite by chance, that first letter had been sent to me, and thereafter I was constantly kept of word of how he was treated in prison before he was hung. In desperation, as the clamour of international representations for his reprieve grew ever louder, we had to find a way through to the military mind. And Jim Callaghan, as Prime Minister, wrote a very moving letter, reminded General Zia of the old soldier's saying, "The grass grows swiftly over a battlefield, but never over a scaffold." How true that saying is, for that scaffold hauntingly remains today as stark and somber as when it was erected. Now, time is the great healer, respect the great reconciler. Bhutto will always be a controversial leader in Pakistan and elsewhere, but also he will always be one deserving of respect. My hope is that I can, in the few minutes available to me, enhance that respect by recapturing some of the highlights and memories of his foreign policy. Indeed, this is part of the process of healing, a kind of catharsis through respect. My respect is that of a foreigner, but one who has loved Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India ever since I first traveled there as a young medical student in 1959. On September the 30th, 1963, Mr. Bhutto showed why he, a child of colonial rule, felt so deeply about colonialism when he said to the UN these words, "The domination of one people by another is no new phenomenon. However, the organized form which it has taken under the system of colonialism is perhaps unique in the history of the world. The most pernicious aspect of colonial rule is that economic exploitation, which in its basic purpose was sought to be concealed under the notion of the superiority of one race over another, whether as reflected in the brutal form of apartheid or in the more subtle doctrine of civilizing nations holding empire over distant lands for the selfless purpose of training their backward peoples in the arts of life. The bitter legacy of those ideas," he went on to say, "will, we hope, disappear with the final disappearance of colonialism." His view of colonial rule made him determined not to exploit the poor under independence. Foreign secretaries are not just concerned with foreign policy, but as Prime Minister, Bhutto was even more involved in all walks of life. When campaigning, he made the slogan, "Food, clothing, and shelter" his own, and that powerful slogan many of you in this room have campaigned under, reflecting his abiding passions and his real and genuine interests for the citizens of Pakistan. Now, colonialism did not die with the British Empire. It is highly significant that the children of colonialism in Pakistan played such a crucial global role in ensuring that the colonialism of the Soviet Union, following their invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, after a bitter struggle, was reversed. I believe this outcome of immense historical significance, and I traveled to Pakistan in the early 80s and helped encourage some of those people to pursue that struggle on behalf of us all. But the historical significance of that struggle is that it could never have been undertaken without the foreign policy buttresses which Mr. Bhutto put in place in the 60s and the 70s. He provided the diplomatic sinews for Pakistan to resist the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Now, he, in a speech to the National Assembly on the 26th of November 1962, spoke confidently of three phases which Pakistan's foreign policy had undergone in the first 15 years of independence. I'll summarize them. Phase 1, establishing the credentials of Pakistan's statehood, Phase 2, establishing solidarity with the Islamic world. Phase 3, establishing links through pacts with the West. Phase 4 of Pakistan's foreign policy, establishing close links with China. Yet by far and away, the most important and most difficult decision, a momentous decision, that Mr. Bhutto took was in January 1972, when he summoned together Pakistan's leading scientists and told them he intended producing a nuclear bomb. The profound nature of that decision remains with Pakistan and with the world today. It is in many ways phase 5 of Pakistan's foreign policy, and it is still with us. From 1977 to 79, I did everything in my power to block Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. I chaired a cabinet committee to coordinate our efforts to clamp down on the exports of technology and equipment. I worked with France, West Germany, the United States, and even the Soviet Union to stop the program in its tracks. We slowed it down, but we never stopped it. Yet even then, I remember occasionally asking myself what I would have done in Mr. Bhutto's place, though he was then in prison. Now, every one of the things that I've spoken to you today, I said in Karachi with Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto on my side, who only 6 weeks earlier, in 1989, had become Prime Minister. And also on that same platform was the former Foreign Minister of India, a remarkable tribute to the Bhutto family that he was there. Now, today, in looking at the outline agreement reached in Geneva 2 days ago between Iran and the US, UK, Russia, China, France, and Germany, we can see the relevance of Pakistan's nuclear history. Hopefully, the Non-Proliferation Treaty will in a few months be not only vindicated, but offer hope of constraining nuclear arms development for the future. We all know that Saudi Arabia was a major financial backer of Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. And few doubt that if Iran were to develop nuclear weapons, then Saudi Arabia would call in a commitment, moral or otherwise, from Pakistan to supply them immediately with nuclear weapons, warheads. There are other countries too that would attempt to join Israel in the Middle East as nuclear weapon states in the region. Iran has taken much criticism from Saudi Arabia and Israel because of its potential to develop nuclear weapons. But given the fact that UN inspectors established in 1991 that Saddam Hussein, then president of Iraq, was developing a nuclear weapons program, and the 8-year war between Iraq and Iran, it is not surprising that secretly Iran began to develop the potential to become a nuclear weapons state. It is hard to escape the conclusion either that were it not for the presence of China in particular, as well as Russia, throughout these last few years of negotiations with Iran, there would have been no agreement. President Obama's brave decision to seek reconciliation would not have been sufficient, in my view, given the fear of the Iranian government that they risked an attack from the US and Israel. This level of cooperation between the permanent members of the Security Council started after the fall of the Berlin Wall and in 1990 with the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. There has been a breakdown of that relationship with disastrous consequences starting in 2010 over the no-fly zone in Libya, which I supported. Russia and China abstained, allowing us to take that action with UN authority. It was a breakthrough decision and a brave decision of those two countries, letting the no-fly zone in Libya start. But following the action of the UK, France, and the US, in the view of the Chinese and Russian government, and with some evidence on their side too, that we were going our own way and exceeding our UN authority, they will never again, in my view, in the Security Council, cede such authority without far greater explanation and firmness about following UN resolutions. As a result of their refusal to work together as the 5 permanent states, we see the devastating war in Syria continuing, and now the self-proclaimed Islamic State covering both Iraq and Syria. Now, it is desperately important that we restore relations, and I believe Pakistan can do a lot in the next few years to make that possible and make the UN once again a working arrangement for security. Let us all hope that Iran does accept an unparalleled degree of intrusive nuclear expansion in a few months' time. Then, as a consequence, sanctions must be lifted, even if the US Congress blocks any action urged on by Israel. Iran will hopefully accept President Obama acting as far as he is able over sanctions and using his executive authority. But that is not enough to lift them all. In my view, if all the rest of the countries, China, Russia, and the 3 European countries, and EU itself, lift sanctions, it will not be long before those Republican congressmen facing tremendous arguments from US industrial interest, not least the oil and gas companies, will change their minds. And I think it does occasionally necessitate, in order for the UN to function and the non-proliferation treaty to be respected, countries like Britain are prepared to break their normal relationship of voting with the United States or keeping with the United States and respecting the American Congress. I respect their democracy. They must take their decisions, but they must not bind us. Rapprochement with Iran is the most far-sighted American foreign policy since Nixon and Kissinger flew to Beijing to forge a new Chinese-US relationship. You all know Pakistan played a very important role in this when in November 1970 it was the bearer of an authoritative personal message to Richard Nixon from Chu En-lai, and who had emphasized in that letter that he spoke not only for himself but also for Chairman Mao. Remembering Mr. Bhutto's foreign policy, we should reflect on his saying, "There are no permanent enemies." Now is the time for Pakistan to seize the opportunity of helping China, Iran, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan ensure a peaceful Afghanistan. There are many signs in China today, as I saw in my very recent visit to Beijing, that President Xi is giving diplomatic attention to his highest economic priority, which is to revive the Silk routes and also to build an outlet to the Indian Ocean in Myanmar and in Pakistan. I was in Myanmar and I saw the evidence of that. China is building links between Kashgar and their Xinjiang province with the aim of eventually coming through Pakistan to Gwaddar's new deep seaport. It is hard to conceive of a more ambitious project. Most people will dismiss it, like they dismissed the whole idea of China building pipelines from oil and gas in the Middle East, but they built them. It may take over 2 decades to build, but China is doing the same through part of the Himalayas through into Myanmar. China, with its own problems with ethnic Muslim separatists, will want to see Pakistan dealing with the Taliban in their own country and not fomenting the Taliban in Afghanistan. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, and how wise Bhutto was to see it, China is becoming a global player, and as it does so, it is developing the diplomatic strength to stabilize countries with which it wishes to build economic links. When tankers sail through the Straits of Hormuz, they increasingly turn left to China, and as a consequence, China has real interests in peaceful stability in all the oil-producing states in the Gulf. Pakistan and China have built up over 5 decades strong military and economic links in a way which Bhutto foresaw. Now is the time for Pakistan to work with Afghanistan and capitalize on their already good relations with Saudi Arabia and help the Saudis to improve their relations with Iran. The days of the US or Russia, let alone Britain, playing a decisive role in these countries are over. and the time for the last phase of Bhutto's foreign policy is now.
Thank you very much indeed, Lord Owen, for reminding us of the long shadow which Zulfikar Ali Bhutto cast over foreign policy.